You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, I had posed a question on YouTube for our viewers and asked what the most pressing question that they wanted the answer to. And the number one question that we got back was regarding ethical issues with the Supreme Court and whether Supreme Court justices themselves could be criminally charged with any crime. So I want to speak about that issue in light of the situation that we're presented with right now. We know about a lot of disclosure issues, for example, with Clarence Thomas. Could Clarence Thomas actually face the prospect of criminal charges in light of his refusal to be accurate with his financial disclosures?
Yeah, let me start with an answer to the question, can Supreme Court justices be charged with crimes? The answer is yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. If there is enough evidence to make out probable cause to a grand jury, secure an indictment, and for a prosecutor to believe he or she has a reasonable likelihood of success on the merits. Those are the magic words for federal prosecutors to proceed from indictment to trial. So if the evidence is there, you're damn right, a Supreme Court justice can be charged and prosecuted for violating our nation's laws. Now, you raise Clarence Thomas as one of the thought experiments. Based on what we know, Brian, Clarence Thomas certainly seems to have violated our nation's financial disclosure laws and regulations. So listen, I was a federal prosecutor for more than 30 years, and it was the bane of my existence. I had to fill out every single year a financial disclosure form. They are burdensome, and I can tell you, when I was filling them out, I was scared to death I was going to put a decimal point in the wrong place and might be accused of misleading somebody about some asset or some gift or some liability. We also have to list our debts on these financial disclosure forms, and then I was going to get in trouble for it. So I had people triple check my work to make sure I was right. Clarence Thomas accepts gifts to the tune of, I don't know, $250,000 recreational vehicle from some Republican billionaire who first says, I'm going to have a loan, so you're going to be able to repay me the value of this $250,000 recreational vehicle. And then what does the Republican billionaire do? He forgives the loan. You know, Brian, that's the kind of thing that needs to be reported, and yet it wasn't reported. So not only are there potential violations of financial disclosure requirements, some of which can involve civil penalties of up to $50,000. But if you make false statements on financial disclosure forms, that could be a criminal offense. It's called a false official statement in violation of 18 United States Code 1001. Prosecutors see those charges so often, we just shorthand them as 1001 violations. That's the code section. For example, you know, anytime a judge who is nominated to the Supreme Court testifies before the Senate in their confirmation hearing, if they lie, if they say something that is untrue and is material, we can talk about what the materiality requirement in the law is, but each time they lie, it's a 1001 violation. And you know what it carries? Up to 5 years in prison each time you lie under oath in Congress, whether to the House of Representatives or the Senate. And Brian, I go back, and I will never stop talking about this. When we saw judge after judge after judge in their determination to get confirmed to the Supreme Court, whether it was Gorsuch or Kavanaugh or Alito, say, for example, oh, Senator, Roe v. Wade, protecting women's constitutional privacy rights, the right to make their own reproductive health decisions, oh, that's settled precedent. That stare decisis, it's been decided, it's been affirmed several times over, and I, Senator, respect that kind of precedent. And they said that under oath, and then when they got the opportunity, the first opportunity to actually take that precedent of Roe v. Wade, walk it deep into the woods and shoot it dead, that's what they did. And Justice Alito, I'm going off on a tangent, but bear with me, Brian and viewers. Justice Alito wrote that Roe versus Wade was egregiously wrongly decided from the minute that ruling was handed down, and yet he testified to the exact opposite. That's what we call a 1001 violation, for which he could be prosecuted and imprisoned for up to 5 years. However, now I'm going to get to the practicalities. Right. Can Supreme Court justices be charged with crimes, prosecuted, convicted for crimes they may have committed? You're damn right they can. Will any of the institutions of government take it upon themselves to actually investigate and bring charges against Supreme Court justices who might violate the law? I have seen no evidence that the institutions of government are willing to do that.
I guess the obvious question here is, whose responsibility would it be to bring forward these efforts? Would it be the DOJ?
It would be the DOJ. The FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, is a component of the Department of Justice. That is the investigative agency in DOJ. And then, of course, the federal prosecutors are the ones who decide if there's enough to indict and proceed to trial. And the FBI and the federal prosecutors work hand in glove. I did for years and years and years as a federal prosecutor. So remember, there have already been requests made by, I believe it was Senators Whitehouse and Wyden, if I'm not mistaken, that the Department of Justice open criminal investigations into Justice Thomas, into Justice Alito, for these lavish gifts and accommodations and transportation that they accepted from these billionaire Republicans that they never reported. And here's the other thing, Brian. If you fail to report on your financial disclosure forms all of these lavish, sometimes million-dollar gifts and accommodations, when you add them all up, do you really think those justices reported them on their tax returns and paid taxes on some of this wealth that they came into as a result of their position on the Supreme Court? I'm betting not. So I can't say there are tax crimes that were committed, but I can say there's adequate predication to open investigations into possible tax crimes.
Glenn, I'm looking at a ProPublica article right now with the headline, Justice Clarence Thomas acknowledges he should have disclosed free trips from billionaire donor. That is not only him having failed to disclose these free trips, that is him acknowledging that he misfiled his financial disclosure. So how is that unto itself not adequate predication for the DOJ, for the FBI to come in and say, look, we see that there's been something wrong, because the guy's admitted it first and foremost. You don't even have to look far, because he's already waved his hands in the air and said that it's a crime. And now we have headlines like this one saying that he acknowledges he should have disclosed his free trips on his financial disclosures. So knowing that somebody like you would have been held to a standard where if you put a decimal place in the wrong spot, then you could have been, then your freedom could have been put at risk. How do we have headlines from someone like Clarence Thomas and still it's just crickets from the DOJ and the FBI?
I can't explain the Department of Justice or the FBI's inaction, apparent inaction. Of course, if they are investigating, they should be doing it in secret, and we wouldn't know about it unless and until it became public with an indictment. So maybe they're doing it, could be. Here's the other, yeah, I know, and pigs might fly. But here's the other thing. When you say, you know, Clarence Thomas is waving his hands in the air and saying, I've committed a crime, here's what I think he is saying, and I read the ProPublica reporting. There's been a whole series of articles about Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito taking these lavish gifts and failing to report them. So here's the thing, bear with me. An innocent failure to report or a mistaken failure to report on a financial disclosure form is not necessarily actionable, right? Not necessarily going to support charges. It has to be a knowing and intentional false statement to make it a 1001 violation. And Brian, you may recall in some of the ProPublica reporting, I can't believe I'm saying this, Clarence Thomas said, oh, but somebody told me that this was just, you know, tantamount to gifts of hospitality from a friend. No, it's not. And no, Clarence Thomas, nobody believes that anybody told you that that was the case, such that you didn't have to report it, because there is a de minimis hospitality from a friend exception, and that is designed to cover something like a good friend invited you to their home and they cracked open an old bottle of whiskey that might be worth several $100s, so it's something of a gift to you, and you don't have to report it. Well, you know what? Hundreds of thousands of dollars in accommodations and RVs and private travel, which is not covered, and reportedly Clarence Thomas was, being shuttled around on these private jets of these Republican billionaires. None of that is covered by the de minimis sort of personal hospitality provided by a close family friend. But I think when Clarence Thomas said, "Oh, you're right, my bad, I failed to report it because I didn't think I had to report it. And somebody once told me, one of the earlier justices, that I didn't have to report it." Yeah, I don't believe that for a minute, but I think that is how he couched his admission that, whoops, my bad, I failed to report stuff.
It also kind of falls flat because the poor judgment excuse might work better if he wasn't a judge. You would expect somebody who is literally a judge on the highest court in the land in the United States of America to not be able to cry poor judgment when his whole job is knowing how to exercise good judgment. But here we are. In any case, grateful for those who have written on the community tab and offered up this question, because I think it was very interesting and important to be able to discuss this stuff. And we will have other opportunities here where we'll solicit questions from the audience so that we can have more Legal Breakdown episodes like this one. For those who are watching right now, if you do want to see more of these episodes, please make sure to subscribe. That is the best way to support our work. I'll put the links to both of our channels right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.